Charity loved crying in the limo going back, and Joey was like, I have never felt this unsure about my connection with Charity. It feels like a bad moment, but this inflection point is really the opportunity to have an honest conversation. Hi everyone, I'm Julie, she's Kelly, and we're here to find love. We're in Bachelorette Season 20, Episode 6, and we're back again this week and every week to recap Charity season. For those of you who don't know us, hi, we're two dating coaches who analyze the relationship psychology and dating themes in reality TV shows, especially The Bachelorette. If you're into this kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button to follow along and join the conversation.
So we're in hometowns this week. Charity went and visited her top four men's homes, met their families. It was Aaron, then Joey, then Xavier, and finally Dotun. Aaron was the one who ended up going home, but we're going to go through one by one to each hometown and talk about what we thought about the dynamic between her and that guy. So let's get into Aaron's first because he was the first hometown. So Aaron's hometown was in, where was it in? Houston. He had talked about being from New Orleans like all of last week, but then his hometown was in Houston, so whatever. What I will say about Aaron is that we have not liked him for most of the season, but I do think that in this week when we finally saw him with his family, that to me felt like the first time we were starting to peel off the layers of him, and I felt like it was the first time I actually got to see more of his real personality. To be fair, it's not that he seems drastically different than he has been with Charity or in the house. I just think that when he was with his family, he was just like a little bit more relaxed, and you could just tell he's just being more genuine than, just when he was doing all of his little tricks with Charity and the piano playing and the coin toss and just all the tricks on tricks. Like, he just seemed so manufactured. But now I feel like upon seeing his family, his whole family is also similarly very, like, a little bit like rah good vibes. Like, they all have that kind of energy of being very like positive, and seeing Aaron in context of them made me kind of understand, like, I think he might just have a cheesy personality that is like, him and his family, they're all like kind of cheesy people, and so he's being cheesy with Charity. Do I still think it was a bit manufactured? Yes, but I also see that that's also sort of just the type of person he is. It's not a personality type that I love personally, but I do think that there is more, there's something more authentic about him than I think I had been perceiving. And this hometown gave me a lot of new information about him. And I feel like I am less judgmental of this man than I had been before.
He came across really likable, and it explained the driving force behind his personality to see his family have that kind of energy. It was like, okay, maybe this is not something that he is intentionally doing to present himself in a specific way. It just, like, that combined with the show and how artificial it already is, I think it just kind of made Aaron more of a persona than a person. But
yeah.
Right? Like, his family really, really humanized him this episode, and I liked him a lot better than I thought I would. I haven't really been able to understand him outside of these antics he's been getting himself into. It was interesting to see him being really humanized and understanding why Charity has kept him as long as she has. She obviously saw something there, and meeting his family just really revealed so much about him.
One of the things that he did this episode that also made me feel like he's being a little bit more real than I had been maybe perceiving is actually at the very start of their hometown, he sits Charity down and directly notes, it's kind of weird that we're going into hometowns been having a really strong connection at the beginning, and now things are a little bit like we haven't had a lot of quality time together. We haven't said the L word together. The fact that he mentioned all of that stuff and brought up potential, weak spots in their relationship, that actually made me appreciate him more, as opposed to just pretending, look, we are doing good, we are connected, we are falling in love with each other. Like, it felt like he was willing to acknowledge that there were, maybe some dips in their connection, and that willingness to acknowledge that made me feel like he's not totally just like, I will paper over everything with platitudes and niceties and saying the right thing, which is what a concern has been with him this whole time. So this was a good moment. This was a good week for him. Sadly, he went home, but I did feel like I came to appreciate him a little bit more. That conversation, it's just good to be honest when that kind of thing is happening in a relationship, when you feel like the dynamic has shifted and, you know, things are not the way they once were. People really struggle to, especially, you know, if you're together for a really long time, people can really struggle to like name that there's something that is changing in your relationship. But it's usually better to name it than to ignore it, because when you name it, then the two of them were able to like talk about it. Charity like was immediately like, yes, that's how I feel too. Like they were almost able to connect over the fact that they had both been feeling this dip, and it kind of brought them closer to talk about it and try to face it head on. So to me, this was like a really nice little relationship moment between them. Again, sad that he went home. I'm not sad. I was happy for him to leave, but I like the other guys better. But it was a nice moment.
It was nice how he was able to name it with Charity, and he was able to make the relationship seem a lot more genuine. And this is like the really cool thing, because this entire season, I think I've been the one that's been writing hard on Aaron is like maybe the villainous person, and that's just not the case. It just goes to show like time is really the best indicator of who a person really is, and we just needed to have time with Brayden, time with Aaron to really understand the content of their character. The only frustration I had with him was that he tried to make that final judgment call before Charity or like a lot of the men could really come to their own conclusion of how they felt about the season or about the people around them. That was really my only hang up with Aaron. But it's really nice to be proven wrong that Aaron is very, despite how he came across this season, at the end of the day, he is a person that is looking for love. His family supports him. He is really opening up his heart. I really liked seeing that, and I feel very confident he's going to be on Bachelor in Paradise.
Definitely. Although I will say I found it hilarious that he told his brother, yeah, like it was hard watching other guys date Charity, but I just focused on myself. I'm like, did you, Aaron? Did you focus on yourself? You know, is there room for improvement in terms of all of how Aaron behaved on this season? Yes, absolutely. But I think we can safely say that there's something semi-genuine between what was going on. At least in this last week, we saw something genuine between him and Charity. And so, you know, that's what we're looking for here.
How did you feel about Aaron B's storyline on the show, from a question mark of a character to kind of ending the season on a really high note? Let us know in the comments down below and let's talk.
Okay, so our next hometown was with Joey, and I think we can all agree that the Joey date was the one that was the most surprising of the four. In his hometown, they were somewhere in Pennsylvania. He took Charity to do some tennis and then meet his family at the tennis, which was, by the way, very cute. The dynamic between Charity and Joey during that little tennis, you know, just hitting some balls around scene, it was so cute. She was so giddy. That is one thing I immediately noticed, the difference between how she is with Joey versus how she was with Aaron. Like with Aaron, it's a lot more like ginger, like they're kind of still finding their footing, versus with Joey, she just seemed so like flirty and cute. She even said this to the camera, and I totally agree. It's just night and day in terms of how comfortable she clearly seemed to be with Joey. So I was just feeling a lot more fond of their dynamic. I've been fond of them up until now, but this scene, and it was just cute seeing Joey, like, you know, whatever, in his element, teaching her how to play tennis. It was just all very sweet. It was such a good little date scene. Then enter the uncle, the evil Uncle Joe. Don't know if he's evil, but at least in this storyline, in Charity and Joey's storyline, he certainly is the villain, because he was the one who comes in and he basically makes this observation after hitting the ball around with them a few times. He makes this observation that he feels like Joey is maybe not being his full self, or that something is a little bit off with him in his dynamic with Charity, which he later communicates to Charity herself and to Joey. And this is a big revelation for the viewers, and definitely a big revelation for Charity, because it throws doubt and makes her suddenly start to wonder, like, am I getting the real Joey? I've never been worried about this.
Well, Charity definitely likes Joey the most in terms of the butterflies. But I did notice that she had her little detective hat on for all of the dates. And with Joey's date, she was in particular looking for concerns because the way their conversation happened last episode where she expressed some concerns about meeting his family. And he was like, trust me, just like really get to know them. For Uncle Joe to basically say, I don't know if Joey is being his true self. And at the top of the episode, Joey said, my uncle's opinion matters more than anyone else. He knows me the most. He's mentored me. He's seen me through like these different personalities that I've had as an athlete or as a son or as a person living in the world. It was a pretty big indictment for his uncle to say that and maybe verbalize something that Joey has not been able to articulate or process in terms of, is the process too fast? Can I get there this quickly with someone? I don't know. It made me definitely feel like the bubble had burst. And I think Charity had that same energy on the date as well, where she was just so encapsulated in this like really lovey vibe with Joey for pretty much the entire season.
Yeah.
His family says some things about the insincerity and then she can't look at him the same way almost. It's like, oh my gosh, he's not exactly that like butterfly vibe only. There's something more to this relationship and I don't know what it is because we haven't even gone there yet.
Joey isn't necessarily someone that I would have pegged as a people pleaser, but then again, that's the thing about people pleasers. Like, it can be actually kind of hard to recognize it because the behavior can be so subtle and so baked into the way you behave in front of someone that that person might not be able to realize that that's what's going on. The thing that one of his family members said is that sometimes Joey can essentially mold his personality to be what the person in front of him wants him to be. And this is something that it's definitely an aspect of people pleasing. It's not the only way people pleasing can manifest, but it's definitely a very specific way of doing it where you essentially just change your personality to be who you think the person in front of you wants you to be. In a relationship, it might look like, it kind of was reminding me of the classic cool girl speech from Gone Girl, where she talks about like how women will change like what they're like depending on who they're dating. So if they're dating someone who's really into sports, she'll suddenly be into sports. If they're dating someone who's really into, having like a sexy whatever, then you'll suddenly be like this sexy persona. And so it reminded me of that whole theory, but it was interesting because I hadn't necessarily thought of Joey as being someone like that.
So it was really interesting to see his family share that perspective of Joey to Charity because I don't think Charity was really expecting it. I think that she was expecting to just kind of see, do I fit in with his family? She wasn't expecting for his family to say, I don't know if Joey is being who he really is in the relationship. And by the way, this is an ongoing problem that he's had. The perception of people pleasing, because I am also a person that struggles with people pleasing, it's not like an intentional shift in personality. It's more of like you're just wanting to make other people happy, even if that means not putting your needs first. And then you just do it enough and it just becomes very clear that that desire to make other people happy at the cost of yourself is too much of a sacrifice to make. And it typically comes from a lack of self-esteem or a sense of insecurity about who you are in the relationship. I think it's really important that when people come into relationships, they, and me included, you actively work on your sense of self and your wholeness that exists independent of any external thing or partner or job. All of this is really, it informs who you are, but is not who you are. And I think of Joey, him struggling with that does indicate that he probably has some stuff he's working on, as does everybody. But for his family to specifically bring it up made me think that they were seeing him in a really, not like an unhealthy state, but seeing him as like, this is not who I would want. I would not expect Joey to be in this situation. And then for them to bring it up to his, potential wife, to me was a really big, maybe not red flag, but beige flag of Joey's potential concerns, because it would be different if he had told Charity before, this is something I've struggled with, or this is how I've been in relationships, right? Like, I noticed that I kind of want to please the other person. I say yes to things I don't really mean to say yes to. I just want to make them so happy that I lose myself in the process. That would be great if the connection was primed with that. It hasn't been. It's literally just been fun, kissing, lots of physical touch, lots of giggling. So then for Charity to discover that at Hometowns, I think it really was her reckoning of the fact of, I've only known a side of Joey, but this reflective side that you and I have been pointing out has not been there, definitely hasn't, because that could have been something that was spoken about before his family. I think her finding out from them turned her off of it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would be freaked out too. And that's the funny thing about people pleasing. It's like you're over prioritizing other people's needs and preferences and desires. You're over prioritizing that above your own because you want to be liked and accepted, which is normal. It's, of course, we all want to be accepted by others. This is part of humanity. We would like to all be part of a society. It's a basic human need. That all makes sense. But the problem is that when that desire for acceptance starts to get in the way of your authentic self-expression, you are not only neglecting your own needs and neglecting your own preferences, but you're also creating more superficial connections, which is ironically the thing that you are wanting connection, but in fact you are kind of like sabotaging your ability to really connect because the other person isn't seeing the real you. So the fear that Charity is having in this moment, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, it's like she thinks that she's been connecting with the real Joey, but now she's finding out maybe he's been just putting on this front because, you know, he thinks that's what Charity likes. And, you know, we use people pleasing to be liked, but it's actually making it harder for people to get to know the real you. And ultimately it's getting in the way of like a true, strong connection, which is sad. It's like a very sad thing because, you know, it's a form of self-sabotage at the end of the day, even though it's born out of wanting to be accepted.
An authenticity that exists within Joey that he hasn't really been able to name would be an eventual problem that they would have to contend with in the relationship. It's not something that Charity would have to steward him through, but it is something that would exist in the relationship, and how much it's able to really be meaningfully addressed is up to like a person's self-awareness of understanding these behaviors. And, you know, like these little things where it gets you into, oh my gosh, I'm people pleasing. How do I get out of this reflex? And how do I think about it? And then how do I include myself in the process? You have to buffer the way that you're thinking about yourself and the way that you're presenting yourself. And so much of it is really tied to like your self-awareness of how you're coming across as a person. Right. Joey is on his journey, and Charity gets to decide if she wants to be his partner and kind of collaborate with him on this self-discovery. And that's for her to decide, and that's for Joey to understand if that's even something he wants to work on. Because I would argue that's maybe a bigger issue if he's like, I'm not people pleasing, I am being myself, and I am like, I don't know what the problem is, everybody is happy, I'm happy, or is something wrong with the way that I'm moving in the world. That's much more of like a red flag. I just think that he maybe is not even aware he's doing it, and he doesn't even have an understanding that like his family is perceiving it. And another thing too that I will say of Joey is that this environment, just like what I said of Aaron B, it does produce an air of like superficiality. So it is easy where like these unhealthy behaviors of presenting a persona, like kind of being a chameleon to move through production and safeguard your true essence as a person, those things are really uplifted on the show. So maybe that's something his family also said. Like maybe Joey is being true to himself, but he's leaning on this personality reflex that he's developed in life. He's not really struggling of people pleasing, but he is leaning on that skill on this show, and his family is seeing that in this one night of like, Joey is he's very aware of the cameras, he's very aware of Charity. Is this Joey? I'm concerned. You know, like his family could really be using his people pleasing or that particular concern as a mouthpiece to their own concerns about, I don't know if I want Joey to be in a marriage. I don't know if I see him being ready. I don't know if I can see him getting there based on how I've seen him outside of the show. So like there's so much
there's so many things that could be happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so tough because part of me is also wondering, your family really knows you well. Obviously, they've seen you grow up and they like know you inside and out. But there are other situations where your family members might have perceptions of you that are either outdated or that are colored by their own personal challenges. And so there's also a possibility that all of these people are projecting something onto Joey or are kind of like accusing Joey of something that might not even be true, because we have not heard Joey say anything about struggling with his own ability to express himself. So, and in fact, the only things that I feel like Joey has talked about related to this topic are this idea of when he's talked about his family's experience of his dad coming out as gay, which, by the way, I'm very mad that we didn't get any gay dad content in this episode. I don't understand. This is what everyone was so excited to see Joey's hometown so we could have like some great gay dad content. I don't even think his dad was there, but he didn't talk at all. We didn't get any real scenes with him. I was very disappointed in that, but that's an aside. But Joey has talked about that as being like a big way for his family to like come into themselves and come into, you know, he seemed to have a lot of appreciation for his dad's ability to live his true authentic identity. And so to me, this would make me think that Joey is someone who prioritizes authentic self-expression, right? Because he had this experience of seeing his dad struggle with not being able to come out and be his true self, and then finally being able to do so, and having the family like kind of rally to support his ability to self-express in the way that is actually true to who he is. So in my head, I would think that those experiences would maybe help Joey see the benefit or place a lot of value in prioritizing who he really is. But I don't know. This is just the only thing I know about Joey from like what Joey has said about himself. That's the only thing we really know about him. So I'm just going off of one little piece of information. But that seems pretty far away from the descriptions that his family members have given about Joey. So personally, I'm just honestly left confused. I don't know yet how to interpret what's going on here. Does Joey actually suffer from a problem with people pleasing, or is this just something that his family is interpreting about him? You know, maybe his family is also very sensitive to any signs of people pleasing, because clearly that might have been something going on in their family dynamic. Because, you know, if the dad felt pressured or felt this like feeling like he needed to perform heterosexuality and stay in the family and stay with his wife, you know, maybe the people pleasing thing is a thing that's been a problem in the family, and they are assuming Joey is struggling with it. But anyways, all to say,
exactly,
so many things that could be happening here that it's hard for me to really say one way or the other without hearing more from Joey himself of how he is interpreting these these observations that his family is, you know, communicating. I would like to hear more. I'm excited to hear Charity and Joey sit down and talk about this and see what Joey says about it.
The really cool thing about this dynamic that they're in is the bubble has burst. The honeymoon stage they're definitely still in it, but they're experiencing a dip that real couples go through. And this is the moment in the connection where they're like, okay, we're done making out. We're done going on all of these incredible dates. Now I really want to get to know you, and I want to have an honest conversation vulnerably about who you are, who I am, and if this can work. That's going to be their next conversation. Charity left crying in the limo going back, and Joey was like, I have never felt this unsure about my connection of Charity. It feels like a bad moment, but this inflection point is really the opportunity to have an honest conversation and engage with each other based on, this is what your family said, who are you really? And then Joey gets to be the person that establishes this level of trust with how much he decides to share Charity and how they co-work on this problem together. So this is a really beautiful moment that they're in. It just feels crappy when the bubble has been that good. It's been so exciting to just be so thrilled by each other that this is probably like a rude awakening, but I think it's the beginning of something better and more real.
One problem with Bachelor shows is that often it kind of feels like as soon as there is one seed of doubt, it can kind of tank the whole relationship because of that's just how it works on this show. And that's one of the things that's very annoying to me because, as you said, in real life, every relationship will go through periods of doubt, periods where things don't feel like they're working or clicking. You find something out that doesn't sit well with you or doesn't align with what you had envisioned. And that doesn't mean that the relationship is doomed, but that's kind of what this show kind of primes you to think, because every time a revelation like this comes out, that person eventually goes home. That's just most often what happens on this show. It's very rare that we see someone who has had all of these revelations or accusations like lobbied at them. It's very rare for that person to still make it to the end. The only exception that I can think of right now in this moment is Nate from Michelle's season. That guy had a lot of people who were like on his back, and they ended up getting engaged. They later broke up, but they did end up getting engaged. But I think most often on this show, any doubts just turns into a breakup, and that isn't how it should be in real life. It isn't how it has to be in real life. Okay, we got into a whole lot here in this Joey conversation, but let us know down below what you thought about this whole people-pleasing revelation that we got about Joey, what his family said about him. What do you think is really going on here? And do you think that this relationship can pull through and survive at the end of this? Leave us some thoughts down below. Also, have you ever struggled with people-pleasing? Is this something that you have seen or dealt with in your own life? If you're willing to, we'd love to just talk about it and get some other thoughts down in the comments. Okay, one last thing I wanted to say about Joey. In this hometown date, it did feel like he brought up the interracial relationship conversation multiple times throughout the episode or throughout his time with Charity, both to her and to his various family members. And I kind of went back and forth as to how I felt about this. Last week when he and Charity talked about it privately, I actually really liked their conversation. I felt like it was very genuine. I think he handled it well. I think he was being really realistic about the situation, that he didn't know exactly, like he knows what his family is like, what their values are, but he doesn't really know how they're going to react to, him dating a Black woman. And he mentioned just wanting to, support her as they navigate the challenges. So he seemed very active and open-eyed about the whole thing, which I really loved. This week, I felt like he was starting to drop some kind of annoying platitudes. It felt a little bit more like he was leaning a lot more on the whole, like, listen and learn trope in the kind of performative way. A few other podcasts that I have been listening to, like other Bachelor podcasts, brought this up that they hadn't been impressed last week when he used the phrase listen and learn. That's become like such a popular catchphrase in the last few years. I feel like as consciousness and conversations around racism have like heightened, a lot of companies essentially will kind of say we're listening and learning as a way to seem plugged into the conversation or to kind of, appear less racist. Like they will like say that kind of phrasing, but what's annoying about it is that it doesn't indicate any action. It's like a very passive way of dialoguing with the issues of racism. It's like, I am listening. It's like, okay, and what else? So Joey did use that phrase last week. It didn't bother me as much because it was couched in so many other more active, like indications of being more actively engaged in kind of supporting Charity. So I actually wasn't bothered last week. But this week, I don't know, he had a few moments where he said things like, if we love each other enough, that stuff won't matter, which I was just a little less impressed with. It was giving a little bit more of that whole like I don't see race, I don't see color kind of energy. He didn't say those things, but the whole, like, that stuff won't matter, it just, to me, didn't really resonate, because it's always going to matter. Like, race will always matter to Charity. Being Black is part of her identity. So it was weird for him to kind of phrase it in that way. I was like, you did so well last week. You should just stop talking now. I think the more he talked, the more, like, things that were coming out that, like, I don't know. I think he just maybe was just, like, reaching for some platitudes he's heard in the past, as opposed to being, like, super thoughtful the way he had been in the conversation with Charity. So
yeah, it's great that you're bringing up the interracial conversation that he had of his family, because this is how I can see him being a little bit of a people pleaser. And by me saying this, it's not me labeling him as a people pleaser. I don't know him. I'm truly just speaking about him as a concept, everybody. So, like, I think it's good to make that clear that, like, he is just representing this particular idea that we're talking about. But the thing about people pleasing is it does take on this performative aspect, because you are molding yourself based on the conversation. That's like an offshoot of it, right? So then with Charity, he has this very, very, like, nurturing, thoughtful, weighted approach to it. This is something different. I've never dated a Black woman. I've never brought someone home that was Black. I want to think about this process and our relationship with a lot of depth. He indicated that to Charity, and it was such a strong way of saying it. It was very subtle, but it was very soft. And then you go to his family, and his family, he's like, it's not even a big deal. It was like he was almost trying to get them to see that, like, her being Black was not that big of a deal. So what they should focus on is the relationship more so than anything he has, or anything about Charity's own experiences as a Black woman. That felt like it was coming through very clearly, of him just kind of, like, playing both sides. And once again,
you're right.
Maybe he's not doing it maliciously. He's just like, in this conversation, I can feel what Charity is really asking me to step into this conversation. With my family, I don't even want to make it a big deal. Can we just focus on Charity? Is she Black? I don't even, like, that was kind of the conversation we had. Yeah.
You're so right. It's kind of like with Charity, he was like, all right, we can, like, actually
let's get into
this.
It.
Like,
let's talk about it.
Like, and he was a lot more like, of course, like, you being Black, I don't want to diminish that. That's so important. Like, that is an important part of your identity. Because with Charity, in the context of that conversation, that is, that's what she needs to hear. She wants to feel, because I feel this way too. It's like when people say, like, I don't see color to me, I'm like, okay, if you don't see color, you don't see me. Like, if you don't see race, like, race is part of my identity. So you saying that you don't see race doesn't make me feel good. Like, race affects everything about my world and my life and my experience. So if you don't see race, then you're never going to understand me. So it was like he understood that it was worth being able to discuss and acknowledge that with Charity versus with his family. His family maybe is just, like, so far behind maybe in the nature of these conversations about race and racism that maybe he was just like, better to just, like, kind of paper it over, say the words that I know are going to, like, work with them, and then move us past this. I don't know if I like that he did that. I don't know if I don't really know what to make of it, because, like, I get it. I think a lot of people probably have a version of this experience of there's some people that they're willing to, like, go into the nitty gritty when it comes to these, really tough, sensitive topics. And then there's some people that it's like, I would die before I have to talk about this with, like, my mother or whoever it might be, right? There's some people that it's just, not even worth trying to go there with. But, if Joey is going to be in a relationship with Charity, a Black woman, then he maybe needs to get a little bit more, just a little bit more bold and be a little bit more willing to, because I don't think it would have been so hard to, I can't remember who he was talking to when he said this, but I don't think maybe it was his uncle or maybe it was one of his other family members. I don't think it would have been that hard for him to say, yeah, like, being in an interracial relationship, I think, is going to be difficult because some people will have judgments about us, but, I'm willing to, navigate that, and I want to, support and protect her. Like, it would have been easy for him to have that stance that doesn't make it seem like being Black, it doesn't matter. It's not, that won't matter because we love each other enough. And it's
Yeah.
that's not, it was a subtle nuance that I think I would have liked to hear from him. But not having that nuance kind of made me a little disappointed. I wasn't the most impressed. I felt more, last week I was like, okay, Joey, you're doing not bad. And this week I was like, I think maybe we could have done a little better. All right, let us know what you all thought about Joey's handling of those race-related conversations this week. Did you have any thoughts about it? Leave some comments down below. And let's get into Xavier's hometown, because Xavier was a really fun and interesting one. It felt like we were seeing so much more of his personality, frankly, this week. I have not seen him smile as hard as he was smiling around his family. It was just so sweet. He was just like really in his element. The knitting date as well, so cute.
So
that he
good.
took her. It's just, this was so just, I would lose it if someone took me to their like little private knitting circle to knit with them. I would really lose it. It's just so cute. I would die. I don't even know. So I thought the whole thing was so endearing, this whole date.
Xavier, to me, felt like he kind of had that Joey glow that Joey's been riding all season. Like, Xavier, I think that he's kind of been this, is he good to be true? Is he going to prioritize Charity? He seems so sexy, so intelligent. Like, is he going to be someone you need to worry about? And for us to meet his family, to see the love that he has for his sister, his mom, his dad, to see how he takes his commitments and marriage and the sacredness of that so seriously, it just made him that much more appealing. It was really great to see his sister, who seems like probably the biggest skeptic in his life, be like, I love Charity. You could see it change something in him. It's like it lit down one of his walls of like, am I making the right decision? Because he does seem like he makes decisions with a lot of like thoughtfulness. Like even him deciding to go into his particular career choice because he wants to solve MS because of his mom and because of what she's gone through shows that he, I don't know, like he just takes it really, really seriously. Like all of these little things that he does. I mean, so Charity came on all of the dates once again with her little detective hat on, and she was like, is he ready for a relationship? Is he ready for a commitment? Did you notice that? It was so funny how she, like her insecurities definitely came through, and I understand it, but it was very evident that that was an active area of concern for her. And then for all of his family to say he is someone that maybe gives a little bit more, and he has to be like careful about who he is in a relationship because he gives so much. I felt like, wow, this is what makes him such an appealing person on the show, because the show is basically asking him to step into these really unhealthy behaviors and say yes, just do it, just take the leap. And for Xavier to hold himself back shows, wow, you're really growing, and it explains his timidness. It explains why he's been a little bit more reserved and in his body, because he doesn't want to get swept off his feet. He wants to be completely wide-eyed when he's making this choice. So seeing his family, what a dynamic situation.
Yeah, totally agree. It did feel like a moment of kind of like clarity for Charity, and for I think maybe most of us. It has felt like a lot of people, Charity most prominently, but even when I was saying I've been listening to some other Bachelor podcasts, I feel like a lot of people have been just waiting for Xavier to make this dark turn and like become, I don't know, like a fuckboy or be someone who isn't, I don't know, in some way trustworthy. I feel like everyone is just like waiting for him. Everyone has described him as kind of like this. I know, it's funny. Everyone describes him as like the sexy, you know, shiny object option for Charity, versus Dotun is like the safe, secure person she should choose, which to me is like a funny framing, because I don't think Xavier has really given, personally, I haven't seen any indication that he is secretly like a player or anything. I think he's just hot. And I think that people are maybe projecting a certain persona on him because he's so attractive. And
he's a unicorn. I think that's something that comes across as Xavier. He's definitely a unicorn because you think he's this way, but he's really this way, and this way is so genuine, so multidimensional, and so sincere. People aren't used to that. They're used to, you're right, it's like this face, and really behind it is all of this like toxicity and like unhealthy dating. That's not who he is.
Totally.
So. Or at least that's what the show's saying.
I mean, I too have this bias. I'm like inherently just a little bit more skeptical of people who are extremely beautiful. I don't know. I just have this like, it's like a not a great bias, but I do have it. And I think maybe all of us have fallen susceptible to this with our treatment or opinions about Xavier. I think everyone like loves him, but everyone's just a little bit skeptical of him. But I don't think he's really everything he has said, because he actually said this to Charity on their first one-on-one date when they sat down to talk about like loyalty and such. He even said he's just like, I have a tendency to give too much in relationships. I have this tendency to like overextend myself, do a little bit too much, and kind of lose myself a little bit. Ironically, this is like the thing that people are saying about Joey. Like his family was saying this about Joey. But Xavier is the one who has talked about it in himself, that he tends to do this. I just feel like everything that he has said, and now everything his family is saying about him, is just signaling that this man is this like soft, committed, family-oriented guy who just wants to find a life partner and who just wants to treat his, partner real well. So I think all good signs. I'm getting all good signs from Xavier. I think the other point of confusion with Xavier is, one thing that I've noticed is that he hasn't throughout the season gotten a lot of in-the-moment interviews. I feel like his in-the-moments have been kind of limited. This episode, I feel like we saw more of him, and I suspect it's because when he's been talking about like his family, he's a little bit more comfortable. Like I was noticing the way he was talking about his sister, who was like joking with the camera about like, gosh, my sister, she just loves Charity so much. She loves him more than me. It was so cute. He was just being so much more like jokey and comfortable. So I was like, oh, now we're getting all the Xavier like ITMs that we hadn't been getting before. And I think because we lacked a lot of that, like from his point of view type of content, like we haven't gotten a lot of his perspective on a lot of this stuff. I think that we've all just kind of been building maybe a little bit of a perception of who he is. But now that we're seeing so much of him, or now that we saw so much of him in this hometown, I just think he's like a puppy. Like, I think he's just like a soft, sweet, he happens to be hot, but he's just like a hot puppy. Like, I think,
yeah, totally. Oh, it's so interesting because I love all of these men for Charity, and I love them all for her in different parts of her life almost. If they met organically, if they met outside of the show, they have as much of a fighting chance as any like real sustainable couple, because they just seem like they would be such an amazing fit for each other. I liked Xavier so much more, and he is now my new personal favorite. I feel like I'm just constantly changing things. I really liked Joey before, but now I love Xavier and what he's about. I love the way that he's been so honest about giving so much his fear of committing to something when he takes it so seriously, and just wanting to be really thoughtful in everything that he does, the way that he trust his family so much, in the way that he was able to let down his guard. I love that entire journey, and I love the slow opening up that he's had. It's been a very even-keeled ride of him just being a little closed off. Now he's like, okay, this is me. I just wonder, is like the pacing of the show too fast for how much he naturally wants things to develop?
Yeah, I think it's a really good concern. Not a good concern, but an accurate concern, because there's 2 weeks left of this journey, and it's hard to say whether or not he'll be able to know with great certainty by then. If he's the type of person who tends to be really thoughtful before he makes a decision or makes a commitment, which is a good quality, not a bad quality, but if that's the type of person he is, he might end up struggling at the end of this, because you just don't have enough time to make those big, thoughtful decisions about, unfortunately, one of the most important decisions of your life, which is, if you're going to be with someone for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, he's not going to have enough time to think about this, so he may end up backing out or something. I don't know. It would be sad. I would be really sad to see him, but it would make sense. It would be sad if he ends up feeling like he can't get engaged and so he needs to back out, that it would make sense. I just think it would be devastating. That would be a huge, if I was Charity, like a huge what if type of moment. Like a huge feeling of like the one that got away, what could have been, because, you know, if you weren't in this constructed situation where you have to make a decision at a certain point, would you have made a different decision with another couple months' time?
Oh, Charity is in a pickle for sure, because all three of these remaining men that she has left, all of them are so good for her.
They're really
and
good.
It just really depends on what she wants in this current moment, but then she has to let go of two really incredible men, because I think of Joey, I think of Xavier, they have such potential to be incredible husbands, incredible fathers, an incredible support system for her to really lean on. Who is she gonna pick?
One other thing that I appreciated about Xavier was he brought up this good question to his dad, I want to say it was. He asked his dad very genuinely and sincerely, how do you know when you have met the right person? How do you know when you've met a person that you could marry? You know, how do you know that it's love that can last a lifetime? And of course, that's a question that I think a lot of people ask themselves when they're trying to figure out, like, can I get engaged to this person? Could I marry this person? And I, found it so sweet that he asked his dad this question with all genuineness, because, again, it just shows how much he's thinking, how much he's wanting to make the right decision, not just a decision based off of passion. So, again, love this about Xavier. This man, he's such a dream to me. But it's a great question. I thought it'd be fun to maybe discuss it between the two of us. When people are wondering, how do I know if this is a person that I could be with for the rest of my life? What do I look for? How do I know this is not the one, but someone who I could make it with? Do you have any thoughts on this, Julie?
I do have thoughts, and then I want to switch it to you because you just got married, so I would love to hear your own perspective on it. It's like an ability to grow with someone and an ability to choose someone at their lowest points. I think that I just wrote about this, so this is very top of mind for me. I think a lot of people confuse compatibility for like, hey, our friends really get along, our family really love each other, we travel well together, we have a lot of the shared values in common, our religion's the same, we have some similar hobbies. All of those things are very compelling, and I would say that they are definitely good determinants of getting in a relationship with someone. But you can have that with many people. You can get along with a lot of people. You can have a shared vision for life with a lot of people. I think what really gets down to the brass tacks of it is if you can be there for them when they're at their lowest and they can't offer you anything. You see who they are, you see their shortcomings, you see what they're working on, and you choose them anyways. I think that active choice to really be able to choose someone in all of the ups and downs, through all of the growth that you will inevitably have together, is a true level of compatibility that the strongest marriages are typically founded on. It's typically not the fantasy, the honeymoon-ness of it. I think it is a choice that you're like, this is a really big choice. Like, if I marry you, I'm basically committing to being there for you no matter what, because I love you so much and I'm so committed to growing with you for the rest of my life. That's a huge decision to make. So that's my opinion on it. But what about yours? I really want to hear what you think.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I think that's really well said, that it's that ability to grow with each other and to choose each other in the lowest moments. I think that's such a good way of phrasing it. What I had been thinking about when I was pondering this question, you're right, like being on the same page about all the big stuff. I do think it's important because I so often encounter couples, clients, people who are, you know, way into a marriage, and that's when they discover, as it turns out, we're not in agreement about whether to have kids. As it turns out, we're not in agreement about how important sex is in a relationship or in a marriage. We're not on the same page about this. As it turns out, we're not on the same page about finances and how much we're going to spend and how much we're going to save. These are huge, big things that definitely you should discuss before you commit to a lifetime with people. But you're right that it's not the only thing, because being aligned on those things alone doesn't mean that your overall relationship will last. But I will say, if you're thinking about marrying someone,
it helps.
Have those conversations. Please don't wait until after you're married or after you are already have legal things tying you together. Please don't wait until then to have those conversations. It's really important to really talk about and make sure you're on the same page about a lot of those big things. I would even say, like, when it's not about having the same religion, just being on the same page about the role of religion. If you're going to have kids, or your kid's going to be religious, blah, 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 blah. All of this stuff about the politics and the values. I do think it's important to discuss the things that are important to you. Those are the things that you should be discussing before you make this big decision. This is one of the things that really bothers me about this show, is that the people on the show don't get to discuss a lot of this stuff really until before, like maybe in the fantasy suites, that's like really the only time that they get to discuss a lot of this big stuff with the cameras off, because a lot of this stuff isn't stuff that you can really talk about on camera, like how you handle your money and things like that. It's like you can't really talk about that with cameras on, or I mean you could, but you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
But so that stuff I do think actually is pretty important. That's the less, I guess, romantic stuff, but it always is the stuff that ends up, when you look at the stuff that ends marriages, it's often this stuff. It's very often these things that theoretically could have been figured out, discussed, aligned on prior to a marriage. The other thing, which aligns with what you're saying, Julie, is I think it's really important to have experienced as a couple all of the kind of major life events and experiences with each other. So conflict, anger, sadness, boredom, making decisions together, spending a lot of time together, spending a lot of time apart, highs, lows, all of it. All of these major kind of types of experiences that you will go through in life, I think ideally you go through a cycle or two of all of those experiences before you commit, because you kind of want to see how you're going to feel and how the other person is going to behave, how your relationship will withstand each of these different types of life stages. Because if you get married or commit to someone when you've only had like the passion part of it, then you don't know what the conflict is going to feel like, or you don't know what the boredom is going to feel like. You want to know that when I'm bored, I will still feel like I still want to be with this person. You want to know that about yourself. You want to know that about your partner. You want to know that when we have to make a decision together, it's not going to tear our relationship apart, right? You want to know all of those, what you're going to be like, what your partner is going to be like, and what your relationship is going to be like in each of those big life events. And again, that's the thing that really bothers me about this show. You're not going to get to have all of those types of experiences in the context of this show. You're going to get to jump off of a bridge and have adrenaline. Like, those are the main things that you have on this show. And so I just don't think anyone on the show ever has even remotely close to enough information about the person that they are going to get engaged to make that decision. And, you know, it's not about, like, Xavier is so right. It's like the passion alone. And that's the thing. The dad even said this to Xavier, and Xavier was like, But the dad was like, it's just a feeling you get when you're around them. No, don't decide to get married to someone based off of a feeling. That is never what you should make that kind of big life decision about, because big feelings, dime a dozen, will always, you're always going to find another person that you can have real big feelings with, but you need to see how this relationship weathers the test of time, all of these cycles of experiences. So I would say those are the two big things for me. It kind of dovetails into what you're saying about like the low periods. And I would even say like low periods and all of these other periods too. I want to see you through everything before I marry.
That's one of the things the show suffers from, because there isn't an ability to see someone through those moments. You can just talk about it. Talking about it and going through it are two very different animals. It's very different to say, this is what I'm like in a fight. I tend to be, like, someone could be like, I tend to shut down. And it's like, oh, okay, I can totally deal with that. And then in the fight, you're seeing them shut down and you're like, oh my God, I'm also activated. What do I do? It causes all of this frustration. And I think that's why just talking about it, intellectualizing something is not as imperative as the felt experience of what the relationship needs. So yeah, I think it's very it's good to just see someone very clearly before you get married, because when you get married, nothing really changes except you now have this piece of paper binding you together, but your relationship is still the same. It's still the same when you have kids. It's the same when you do anything. So can you have conversations with them before these big moments, instead of having these big moments be these catalysts for these conversations? Really good relationships, they tend to think about it, talk about it, process it before those things. They go through those events together. They do the best they can, resolve to do better, and then you just keep doing that with the relationship the rest of your life. There is no moment that you reach equilibrium. It's always going to be rocky, because we're always going to change and evolve.
Humans.
So it's exactly, we're humans. So that is a natural part of the relationship progression, and I think should be embraced, should not be something to shy away from or to believe it won't happen to your relationship, because it will. It happens to everybody.
It happens to everybody. Absolutely. I appreciate that you mentioned that too, because people, especially on this show, but also I feel like on the internet, it's like very buzzy to be like, we're just looking for red flags and you want to find someone who has all green flags. No, that's just not true, because in reality, everyone has bullshit. Everyone, messes up. Everyone will make mistakes, do things wrong, have old wounds that can get triggered. You and I are relationship coaches. We work in this space. We literally have our brains down in all of these, like, here's the relationship tools. Here's how to have healthy love. This is what we do all the time, every day. But we also fuck up. Like,
exactly.
In our personal relationships, we're not like, I am an angel. I am so good at everything. No, we also snap.
It just means we're obsessed with it, guys. Like, we're obsessed about love. We know the techniques. We know the tools. But all of that is for naught if we're not putting it into daily practice. And I think it's very humbling for people to work in the relationship space to admit that. And I share that with my clients, that I'm not perfect, because I wouldn't want someone to believe just because we specialize in this makes us operate on relationships at a higher level. It just means we try really, really hard to keep it that way. But of course we slip. It's just like, how quickly can we get back to the place of consciousness? That's what we're constantly orienting ourselves around.
Ooh, so well said. Getting back to that place of consciousness. Wow, that's such a good phrase.
Thank you. Like always, okay, the episode can end now. We don't need to talk anymore. All
right. This was really interesting. I'm glad this was like a weird tangent, but it was a very interesting conversation. Just to thank you, Xavier, for bringing this up. It was a great question. I think it's a good thing to think about. Would love for you all to let us know down below. What are your thoughts? What do you think you need? How do you know when someone is the person that you could spend the rest of your life with? What are the things that you're looking for? What do you think about the things that me and Julie discussed? Let's keep this conversation going down below. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. Like, this is the stuff I love talking about on our show.
I know, it's so juicy.
It's so great to get back to the relationship themes as much, and to have these characters on the TV show inspire this kind of dialogue between us and everybody else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do feel like this is also the stuff that just makes watching The Bachelor fun, because it's the catalyst, really. It's I love the drama, I love the mess, but really it's just taking a dynamic or something that's brought up in this show and using it as a catalyst for conversation. Okay, this takes us to Dotun, and honestly, there's not much to say about Dotun other than the fact that he has the biggest endgame energy of all time. I mean, this hometown just felt like they are writing up a story for these two when they're engaged for us all to reflect back on, because every moment in this hometown was just so beautiful. From his family, parents come back from Nigeria to surprise them. Oh my gosh, so sweet. The sweetest grandma of all time. Just everything about this was amazing. After the hometown, they go to the movie date, see the movie of their lives. I mean, the whole thing was just it was romantic. It was beautiful. It felt like Charity meeting her literal in-laws is what this whole date felt like. It just feels so, he's the one. I mean, we love him. We love them. It's amazing.
It's so overt. I've never seen a show where it was this obvious that he is going to be the one that wins. his mom telling him, you're already a part of the family. I see you as my daughter. I'm going to take you to Nigeria and have a big wedding. For them to, he didn't just like send Charity off. They had an additional date at the drive-in where they got to look at their childhood memories together. It's wild. I know last week you and I were talking about who do we see as her final person, and we picked Dotun. It seems like the show has picked Dotun, Charity has picked Dotun, everybody in the world just knows they're going to end up together, and it's such an overt demonstration that I don't think I've ever seen this kind of obviousness. Like, there is really, unless like the men really change it up during hometown week, I just don't see Charity having another option besides Dotun, because it is that good. Their chemistry is so perfect. He's kind of like the best of both worlds with like, is he too good to be true? And oh my gosh, he's so genuine of everything he does. It's kind of those two, all of these things that we've kind of been noticing are potential obstacles with her other three. He is so effortless in the connection with her. It's wild.
Totally. I am completely in agreement. I have truly nothing to say about them because they are just so sweet and wonderful.
Obvious.
I will be shocked. I will be shocked if they don't end up together. I will be like devastated and heartbroken. It would have to be like a huge swerve or something that happens at Fantasy Suites, or when, you know, they meet her family. It would have to be a Charity's brother doesn't like Dotun. It would have to be some kind of random swerve to take them off course, but as of right now, this just feels like end game on end game on end game. I just really love them together. I love everything about their dynamic.
Very, very well said, and really sums up their date. When I was watching it, I was just like, okay, you're right. It's just like she's meeting her true in-laws, and they are embracing her. And very similarly to Dotun, who seems like he has completely been all in on the process. His family is all in on the process. And I can tell Charity that was the feeling that she was looking for during hometowns. She wanted to be with a family that felt very accepting, where she felt like her relationship and herself was being prioritized. And she has it with Dotun without any extra energy, which is great, because that extra energy can go towards like building the relationship. It should be this good at the beginning, and it is.
If you're not subscribed to our channel yet, make sure you do so. We do a Bachelorette recap every single week. We're recapping every episode of Charity's season, and we will be back next week for Fantasy Suites. Ooh, I'm so excited. It feels so juicy. I can't wait to see how she handles this. Oh my God, I can't wait.
Exciting.
It's going to be fun. All right, we'll see you all then. Bye.